Warner, Jake McNamara, and Daniel Devins, and quite a few of us here. It's going to be a fun one. We got a lot to talk about, not just with college hockey and the Knights, but we're also going to talk about the Olympics some more. We previewed it for you last week. We'll get more into it here this week, but first, why don't we take a wrap around the ECAC, take a look at the women's side of things and what the standings look like right now. Clarkson with 28 points sitting in third place, behind Harvard with 30, Cornell with 29, and then could it be at St. Lawrence trailing by quite a few with 22 and 21 points respectively. Yale with 15, RPI with 14, Dartmouth with 13, Brown with 9, and at the bottom, Union and Colgate both with 8 points this year. So Clarkson's certainly within striking distance of the Harvard Crim. And oddly enough, that'll be their opponent this Friday as they take their mom down in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, Matt. A good one. I know a lot of the Olympics with going from different schools, but most of the East.
Now that Clarkson has lost their game-in-hand advantage over the Crimson with those couple of ties last weekend. So if Clarkson can come away with a victory there, they will be tied with Harvard in points. I'm not sure who would have the tiebreaker. I think it would be Clarkson with the number of overall wins that they have. So if Clarkson can come away with a victory on Friday over the Harvard Crimson, they should be sitting in first place. That also, of course, depends on what the Cornell Big Red do quietly, and I mean quietly enough, sitting at 29 points. So it'll be interesting to see how Cornell plays in their upcoming matchup. But really, Clarkson can't focus on that too much. You got to stay focused on your game and how you're going to try to come out and play and defeat, hopefully, a good team in Harvard and try to get yourself back to that first overall seed in ECAC contention.
And I'm going to check right here, but as far as I know for tiebreakers, here we go. It was head-to-heads. Then after that is overall wins. If you're tied there, then you go game to game.
Would come down to wins because Harvard, if Clarkson gets the win at Harvard tomorrow, they lost to the Crimson here at home, and they would have beat Harvard on the road, so getting the head-to-head tie, move right on to wins. Clarkson fortunate to not have to play. They have a couple of out-of-conference games that they were able to come away with earlier in the year, and that's where we talk about some of those games, even those games like against North Dakota where you may didn't come out with one win and a loss. You get experience from it, but that win now comes crucial because you have an extra game in hand on Harvard. So if you get into those tiebreaker situations, right now Clarkson has the most wins out of any team in the EC in the overalls, and just sitting 2 behind Harvard, but with more ties than the Crimson.
And of course, you know, if the
We saw Clarkson play good against Princeton, but Princeton able to battle back and really give the Knights a test. So, I mean, it's about trying only to secure that number 1 seed, but the further you are up seeded, usually the lesser of a team you have to play in that first round. And I don't think the Knights really want to run. It would, as much as we'd like to see it, they wouldn't like to run into Lawrence. That would be a team we'd like to avoid if at all possible, just because the matchup always seems to bring out the best in both teams, and those games are always close. But I guess if you're Clarkson, you're looking for that no-one seeding, not just for the fact that you get the home ice advantage out, but then you hopefully get one of those lesser teams and possibly can avoid a team like St. Lawrence.
Definitely. Then if we look at the standings on the men, I think it's looking a little bit different. Of course, one thing to take note of, the men play an additional weekend that the women don't, so they'll have another weekend after the women finish up. There's still 3 weekends left in the men's schedule. They take they take everybody, but the top 4 teams get a round bye, and then 5 through 8 host 9 through 12 for the first round of the playoffs. Of course, right now, though, Union leading the league with 26 points, followed by Quinnipiac after them, Colgate and Cornell, 21 and 20 points. Clarkson tied with Cornell as well, right there in the 4th spot, fighting for the first round bye. National champions defending their Yale sitting behind Clarkson, followed by RPI Brown. St. Lawrence looking to make a late season run possibly, and then Harvard and Dartmouth followed by Princeton round out the bottom of the conference on the men's side. And of course, the Golden Knight men will be home tomorrow night to take on Harvard, and then Saturday to play Green here at home. And those two met earlier in the season. It was a while back though, so it's been a little while since these two teams got to each other.
Yeah, they played back in November, actually, all the way to the 8th and the 9th, playing Dartmouth at their place in Hanover, Hampshire. Came away with a 3-2 win, and then a 2-1 win over the Hard Crimson. So Clarkson with 2 wins in hand already from this weekend series, and I think we kind of agreed on it a little before air. Looking at what the goal is for the Clarkson Athletics page, it's how many points do you think the Knights are going to come away with? Now, I don't know how many, but I think 4 is crucial for them, especially chasing those top teams in the conference. You look at Clarkson sitting at 20th right now with Cornell, owning the tiebreaker though, so they would technically sit in 5th, then just a point behind Colgate, and only 3 behind Quinnipiac. Clarkson right now, if they could come away with 4 points, that would be huge for them to at least put some space between themselves and Cornell, and even possibly try to catch Glitter or Quinnipiac.
But I'm going to ask your opinion, Dan. It's like every game we've seen here this year,
With it, but they've played some close gator. They've been forced into some one-goal games through their play and the play of the team they've been playing against. They've found some hot goaltenders here throughout the season that have really made it tough on them. And as I just look quickly, not to get a perfect stat, but it seems like just about every win I can see here on the schedule at home has been pretty much by 1.
That RPI game.
RPI and RIT was 4-1-3 early on in the season, back on Parents Weekend. Those seem to be the only get home that the Knights have won by more than 1 goal. So for Clarkson, I think coming out against a team like Dartmouth that has really been struggling this year, graduated a lot of their seniors and really didn't have a big class come in. Now only 7 points in ECAC action, 3-12-1 in conference, 16-3 overall. You have to look at that game as one that you should be able to come with a win, and hopefully that's a game that Clarkson can come out and show that they deserve to be in that top ranking of the ECAC. Now Dartmouth is a team that's going to roll over and give you an easy win, but they're not as good as they have in the past. Clarkson needs to really start taking advantage of those what would be dubbed key points to try to get themselves back into that top 4 and try to secure a first round bye, which is so huge, especially with some of the injuries that we've seen this team. Getting an extra weekend to rest your players could really pay dividend in the long run.
And then going back, we're looking at the national polls, and then being in 14th, they've been right between 10 and 15 for a majority of the season. At one point, they broke into the top 10. And the women, of course, last weekend were at number 8 until they tied Quinnipiac and Princeton, so now they dropped down to 5. But the ladies looking at a good spot in the postseason. And then on the other hand, just 3 slots out according to Pairwise for making it into the big dance. So as we mentioned, these these 2 games is going to be really big for them.
How exactly are they through it?
If you look through the RPI, they're 3 spots out. The right at 19, I think they take the top 16.
There's no UCSC teams in the top 20.
UCSC teams top 20. And there's also come in. He's not in the qualifiers because there's top 10. There's automatic bids. There's a whole big thing for bracketology, but just outside. I
don't understand how most of that works.
We can get into it in a little bit if you want to. It's kind of confusing.
Not most people understand how it works, but the easiest way for it to work is to start winning game. And that is what Clarkson needs to do. You can talk about pairwise as much as you want, and what people will love too is just like how the Corsi number has become such a popular thing. NHL nowadays talking about how that almost 100% of the time would correspond wins and losses. Right now, the thing is Clarkson's not getting the consistent the wins that they need, and that's something they have to fix. And I think Casey Jones is trying to do that. He's tried to set the team up now a little bit differently. I think he's trying to hold the lines a little bit more together, and I think it's hard though when I talk about the injuries that have been going on, but fortunately they should be getting a couple of guys back. We know Ben Sexton won't play in the game on Friday, but Pat McGetty is a possibility, and so is Sam Lebrecht. So those are some guys that Clarkson could desperately move back into the lineup. Pat McGetty with a little bit of a down year, but when he's been in the lineup, he's been very, very good. And I think he brings a lot to the lineup in terms of penalty killing, which is a part that Knights have lacked. Have been about 75% on the year, which is not very good. So the Knights need to, again, get consistency to their game, and hopefully they can do that with some of the injured players coming back, and then get some lines set, get guys playing together, and generate a little team chemistry going.
Yeah. That's exactly what they need to do. To be honest, it's tough, with guys going in and out. I think we had some help from the Clarkson Hockey Blog, if you follow them on Twitter. I know they're out there with some useful information. So they said Sexton, according to their sources, Sexton will be out this weekend, and then Lebrecht, Mindy, as well as Matt Zarbo are all day-to-day. And of course, Matt Zarbo's been out for a little bit of time now since they played Yale back in January. He's one that they desperately need back on the 4th line after they just got Josephs back at the 3rd line center position.
Well, it's so hard to replace your stars. We saw the women's team struggle with it. While Lambert was out with an injury Saturday, and then Gagnon takes that penalty. She misses the rest of the game, really only gets about 25 minutes worth of ice, or 20 minutes into that game, and Clarkson's playing without two of its 3 top centers. Now, of course, Carly Mercer played an excellent game, but it's hard without 2 top centers. We saw Clarkson then really start to struggle in the face-off dot. Really got dominated by Quinnipiac in that game. And it was hard for the Knights to try to compensate for that, especially when you were moving Shelby Nisbet over to center without Lambert there. Then when Gagnon goes out, it was so hard to keep your lines the same. You had players switching all over the place. You had Rattray taking face-offs. You had Shayna McCall take some face-offs. You had Keely Mercer take face-offs. People that are not used to doing it. When that happens, you could see Clarkson's face-off percentage slowly went down. And I think that possession time, something that, especially when you're so used to having that puck possession, once you start to use it, Clarkson's game sort of fell off a little bit towards the end of that game. And I think you saw it in both the Friday and the Saturday night game. When their game started to fall, they started to let the teams back into it, and I think they sort of lost a couple of points because of it going into this weekend with those 2 ties instead of games where you could have come away with 2 wins.
All right, so we usually do it towards the end of the show a little bit early because we talked about it. We'll talk about, first of all, the RPI, and then we'll get into bracket power a little bit. Just to remind everybody, though, this is KnighChat here on WTSC 91.1 The Source, also streaming out on YouTube to WKN Television. But as far as the RPI goes, so it gets calculated, Jake, just because you were looking for it. It's wins on Minnesota. Union leads the ECAC. Hockey East is Boston College. NCHC is Cloud State, and WCHA is Ferris State. So to break it all up, number 1 seeds are going to be Boston College, Minnesota, Union, Ferris. Number 2 seeds, Quinnipiac, UMass Lowell, Wisconsin, St. Cloud State. 3 seeds go to Cornell, Michigan, Northeastern, Vermont. And 4 seeds go to UND, Colgate, Providence, and Mercyhurst. Then they place them all in regionals. They go through the whole shindig, place everybody who need to be. If you look at it, they go through this big whole process. You can read the web paper down on USCHO Biology. But this week's brackets break down to this. The West Regional in St. Paul is UD in Minnesota, and then Vermont and Wisconsin. So Matt, and we'll go around. How about that? UND in Minnesota, who wins the game?
That's an easy one. I really don't foresee any out West toppling Minnesota right now, especially with UND. Like, I mean, how are they in the same conference?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they might.
Well, no, UND I believe is in DH, so Minnesota's in Big Ten.
They sure?
Now that they've really adjusted everything.
Okay. But, I mean, they're close enough to each other where they probably play each other.
Oh yeah, and they used to be rivals big time when it was the WCHA was just out there, and then they had the CCHA before the Big Ten came around, and NCHC was even a thing. They were rivals out west.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't see any team out west toppling Minnesota right now.
No.
I'd have to agree with Mr. Devins. I believe Minnesota right now is probably number 2 behind Boston College, just because they've been able to beat just about anyone that's got put in front of them. Boston College is my number 1 seed. Minnesota is my number 2, so I'm certainly not going to take them to lose in the first round. Nothing against Minnesota Duluth. They've been a very good team, but you can only be so good for so long. You have to have a drop-off year. Right now, it's it for Minnesota Duluth. By drop-off year, I mean they're not ranked in the top 5. They're still top 20. Right now, they sit at number 16. That's a drop-off year, Minnesota Duluth.
Which is kind of impressive.
Yes.
In its own regard.
They're a very good team, but Minnesota right now is the better team.
All right, the second game out there, Vermont and Wisconsin.
Anybody want to win?
I think it's Wisconsin simply because of the speed they have.
Well,
I know Vermont has been a good team. We had a couple games against Vermont, and Vermont can do groups, but if you look at where they are in the Hockey East standings, and if you look at where Wisconsin is, I think Wisconsin's going to beat.
I don't know. Vermont's resilient.
That they are.
They don't quit, and people will let them off, and they'll surprise a lot of people. They did a couple years ago, when they won the Hockey East.
Oh, go back, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I was surprised. Everybody was surprised by that. Like they took down BC. I think they played BC in the championship and beat them. And I mean, I wouldn't. Obviously, it's a team, but I wouldn't write them off. I think Wisconsin still might have the upper hand just because of the speed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Vermont's goaltender there. He played 2 good games against us.
Yeah, he did.
See, in that one, I'll take Wisconsin. I think they're a little better. They're the higher-ranked seed in that case. I think Wisconsin also a very experienced team that I think has played some better teams than Vermont. So they're a little more battle-tested. In that case, teams, we didn't get to see the Vermont game. We just sort of heard about it. At least I did. Vermont played Clarkson hard the entire way, and as it come away with a win. But I just think Wisconsin, what I've seen and heard about them is they seem like they should be the better team. And since they're the higher seed, I'll take Wisconsin to move on. Jake?
I couldn't tell you either way. Like, I was fortunate enough to go to the UVM game, actually. I traveled with the radio stations, so there were definitely some good games. Excuse me. But then Vermont came out on top, so they did have a really strong defense, it looked like, compared to the Knights. But as far as that goes with this thing over on their side of the league, wow, that could mean something else entirely. So.
Fair enough. Moving on to Midwest Regional, that's going to take place in Cincinnati. It's going to be Colgate against Ferris State, and I'm going to just outright, I'm going with Ferris State, because Colgate, if you look at it, a couple weeks ago they broke in top 20. They put a blip down on the radar. And Ferris State has still been in the 52, just flying, and nobody's detected them. And they have been doing magnificent things, and really, nobody's found them over the past couple years.
I think someone's got Ferris State. They're ranked number 4th in the country.
Yeah, but who talked Ferris State? It seems like no one ever talks about Ferris.
Exactly. Until the tournament. Like, I don't even know where it is.
It's in, I believe, Michigan.
See, you can't even, you don't even know
it's in Michigan.
Okay.
Because I looked it up when they made the tournament 2 years ago.
And when they made the tournament 2 years ago, I still had no idea who they were.
Oh yeah, they went to the final.
Ferris State is located in Big Rapids, Michigan.
Big Rapids,
Which is right next to Little Rapids, I think.
Area code 231. Yeah, 231.
Alright.
That's good because I want to send a package to them.
Yeah. No, Ferris State has been a traditional hockey powerhouse no one talks about.
Yep.
But I like Colgate.
Whoa.
Yeah, Colgate crest man.
That's all you're Jake. When Colgate came here,
oh yeah, they were impressive.
They were very impressive.
Very much so.
I really liked what they did. Even though they were down in that game to the Knights, they came back with 2 late goals, third period, to tie it and then take the lead. Right now, if I had to pick, that would be my upset. I would take Colgate over Ferris State right now, just because of the familiarity we have with Colgate and what I saw them do. I like them a lot as a team. Nothing against Ferris State, but I like what Colgate does. They're always to be just in the conversation enough. And in that case, take the Red Raiders.
Red Raiders, Dan?
I'm going to have to go with Ferris State first. I don't know. I'm not too keen on ECAC teams. Just because, I'm a Mexican guy, so why should I root for any other team?
Last year, come Frozen for I was pulling for the Quinnipiac, just because I just see the ECAC shut down all the haters out there.
Now, before this goes any further, click on the Colgate men's ice hockey team on ECAC. What were the first games they played this year?
Ferris State.
They played for State.
And they lost.
But then 7-4, but came away with a 1-0 victory. Now, it's not a lot.
So here's the thing, is that Ferris State has proven that they can beat them by a lot.
Yeah. And I think Colgate has shown that they can come away in a tight game, which is what the tournament is all about.
But
it's one game.
That was it's only one game.
That's game
okay, so that was game 2. Bet you. That was a preseason game?
This is the October 5th and 6th. This is the first game.
That's the first 2 games of the season. Yeah. Ferris State, okay, so I could foresee this. Ferris State when they beat down on Colgate, right?
Yeah.
And game Friday night, okay? Then they come back Saturday, and they let Colgate, have a little more room. It's a typical thing you see where you beat at them, and then you play at their level in the next game, right? State will not lose the next one.
I don't think so either.
Because it's just, there's no way that they whomp on them in this game, and then lose this next one, and they lose the next one after that. No way.
Are you trying to tell me that again, Puma?
One more again. This is then later on the season, Friday, January 3rd. They tie Minnesota in Minneapolis.
Yeah?
In a tournament.
And then go on to beat Ferris State 3-0. Shut out the Bulldogs. Now, I'm not going to tell you that means the world, but I am going to say Colgate is a team that has played a lot of other good teams. Played St. Cloud State the 25th and 22nd, came away with a 4-2 and a 4-3 loss. Now, I'm not going to tell you I think Colgate's the best team in this tournament. I think if the situation falls correctly, I think Colgate has the potential to beat Ferris State.
I think
that's my upset.
It depends on Colgate's last game before the tournament. How well they do. Yeah. Like, coming off a win or a tie of the number one ranked team the night before and then playing a team that you've already beaten. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, that's momentum. Yeah, that's a lot of momentum there. And now, if Colgate comes out, maybe they make it through a couple rounds in the ECAC, and they're still up there in the tournament. Who knows? I'll give you that one now.
I think it's a dangerous team in this tournament that not a lot of people are going to talk about, but I like Clayton. I like what they did here. I think they have the potential to beat Ferris State in that first round.
Man, I think you picked your upset too soon, because my upset pick is the next game. Michigan and St. Cloud's. I'm taking the big blue. Go blue.
See, I wouldn't call that as much of an upset game. It would be the lower ranked seed.
Technically speaking, it's upset.
I like what Michigan's done this year. They've replenished with good talent. They've done a lot of good things in a new conference they are to play in. And I like Michigan. I haven't seen just St. Cloud, but they're also a very good team. Yeah, that's a tough one to call because both those teams are very good, and I don't know if I can be able to make a call on that without knowing what was happening for the rest of the season, because that's a pretty even matchup to me.
Dan? Regional in Worcester, Mercyhurst and Boston College.
Boston College.
No arguing there.
Jake, are you going to take Mercyhurst?
Let's go Boston.
Okay. All right. Cornell and UMass Lowell. I'll take UMass Lowell. I don't UMass. They're streaky in the postseason.
Yeah, I definitely watched the UMass game down at Vermont, and compared to what I saw at Cornell, it was
substantially.
Yeah.
It's a different place down in Hockey East.
When people say that ECAC is one of the more physical leagues, I thought that the teams I saw Hockey East really like to push people around. And the refs like to just let it go. They're one of the reasons that there's
speed and physicality. It's speed and physicality, and in ECAC, it's grittiness.
Yeah.
It's grinding it out game to game.
Yep. That's definitely a good analogy there.
Yep. East Regional in Bridgeport, Connecticut. For all of you who don't know where Bridgeport is.
Sound Packers.
Providence Union.
I'm going to go with Union on this one.
They were impressive in there.
They're an impressive team.
Missing their captain and head coach, and they still came away and came into the third period down 2 goals and came away with a victory.
Yeah, you just don't go to a team through the ECAC without being good. I think Union's got a lot of good pieces there. Bennett's done his job of assembling his team over the years. It seems like when they get rid of guys like Welsh graduates and Grosenick leaves for the NHL,
and the coach,
guys come in. They've got guys just there ready to step up and play. I think now that they got head coach back, got your best defenseman back, they're going to be rolling into that tournament. They're going to be a team that's going to have to beat. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Union Quinnipiac ECAC championship.
Which one do you have to go to? Just say we might. It's only an hour away. We know this year. It's not in New Jersey anymore. Anyway, you mentioned them. Quinnipiac were playing last game of the regional stage against number 11 Northeastern. I have the Bobcats. There's just too much talent on that team.
There is way too much offense for Quinnipiac to be upset by not one of the 6 teams in the country. I don't think any team outside of those top 6. You gotta have 3 lines of defense you can roll. Boston College, Minnesota, Union, UMass, Wisconsin, they all have that. But if you're not one of those teams that roll that 6 defense all the time, you're just not going to be able to stick with Quinnipiac. We saw with Clarkson, they were in it for a while there, but they just couldn't keep with the offense. There's too many good players, too many guys you have to try to take out.
I will get to see them in 2 weeks.
How did Northeastern do in the Beanpot?
They went to the final of BC, and BC really won. I mean, they're still a great team.
Yeah.
Early in the season, St. Lawrence was able to pull a 6-0 victory and I think a 3-2 victory.
I think it would be a game to see.
It would be a good game, but I just think Quinnipiac's got a little bit more horsepower behind the gas pedal that they usually keep on the floor.
So, too much offense, not enough defense. You could just stick with Quinnipiac, but it's just so hard to keep up when you've got 3 lines with dynamic offensive players on each one. It's way too difficult unless you have unbelievable defensive depth.
And the Bobcats will be here on the 1st of March. So that's the last regular season game for the Knights. We'll see what happens then. This is KnighChat on WTA 91.1 The Source. Just got through our bracket power picks for the little bit though, maybe a controversy, something that has Matt and I were chatting about. We saw it on Twitter. The hockey blog reporting that TJ Moore had left the Clarkson University team. I wasn't sure the validity of the statement when I saw the tweet. Checked online. No longer on the Clarkson roster. According to Hockey DB, which really follows just about everybody who plays at any junior level or collegiate, semi-pro, or professional level, and they had him as being removed from the active roster. USCHO has him off the active roster. I'm not sure what happened to TJ Moore, but he is a part that will be missing the remainder of the season, and I know he was kind of a nice offensive part to slip in there every once in a while.
I thought he brought a lot of speed to his game. We saw him score a breakaway goal rather recently. Unfortunately, he has to leave. Don't know why, but it's going to give guys like Simone Bissett a more regular role in the lineup. Also guys like Tyson, who I know, Brandon, you certainly have enjoyed his game. I think a lot of the fans have. I think we have as well. He likes to throw the body. He likes to play physical, even at a little bit scoring. But I think without him gone, it's going to be some other guys who are going to have to step, try to bring a little more offense if they get thrown in there. He was a nice little offensive spark plug, but now you just got to try to find somebody else to fill those shoes.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, he's a skater and smart hockey player, so.
I mean, he's only been here. He had been here pretty much one full season if you put it together, because he had eligibility issues the first half of his freshman year. Didn't really show up on the scene until about January. Of course, when that happened, I know so, TJ Moore out the door. We'll see what happens, but trying to get some of those day-to-day guys back for this weekend. As we mentioned, Pat McGinnity, Matt Zarbo, and Sam LeBrecq will all be day-to-day this week. And we'll have to wait until tomorrow when Matt and I get a chance to look at the lineup sheets and see.
Certainly going to hope Matt Zarbo can get back, start to fill that fine center role that he's done so well. What it would do is probably push Eric Burton up to a first-line center role.
Well, he was there.
Well, with Benston out now.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I think Burton or McPherson takes that role, and then Burton probably steps up as your second-line center. If Pearson's your first with Josephs and Zarbo. So with Ben Sexton Ben Sexton being out, the best time to get Matt Zerbo back is right now, especially when you're losing your best face-off man on the year, one of the best in the country.
If McGarry comes back, Matt, how about this? McGarry comes back, I can see the first line and second line looking like this. First line, I can see Frederick out on the wing with Burton at center, and they move AJ out because those three played pretty well together down on the third line. And then in that second line role, I can see if McGarry's back, he'll be up there with Danilo and McPherson. If not, I see McPherson out there with Danilo and Russo.
I think he'll keep McPherson on the first line.
Yeah, I think McPherson will get the first line spot. And I think if McGarry's back, he'll get up there with Danilo. And yeah, I think the Burton line has played very well recently. I think Burton looks a little more comfortable back at center. At times it looked like he was just not as comfortable playing on the wing with Sen and Frederick. But I think now that he's in center, he's a more natural center. He's a good defensive player too, so he can shoulder some of those defensive responsibilities. But I think Jared Burton is very good with that line. They bring a little physicality, a scoring touch, a little bit of everything. And I think that's what you look for in your second line. A line that going up against Harvard that's got some good players in UVZ and Sean Malone, two guys that are going to score a lot. You're going to need a second line that's going to be able to shut at least one of those, if not both of those guys down. I think that line can not only do the job on the defensive end, but they can also play some runs for you.
And before McGarry went out, he had moved up that one with, I believe it was Burton and was Sexton up there because Jay had stepped up to play with Danilo and McPherson. So who knows what will happen? I guess we'll leave that for Casey to figure out. How about that?
Usually Casey makes a pretty good decision. We'll count on him to once again shuffle up the lines with guys getting back and see what's out there.
I still don't know what he does for the third line and the fourth line. No idea. It's been different every it seems like.
It is pretty much.
I know Josephs will be in there at center. I can guarantee you that.
Joseph will be in there at center, but other than that, we don't know who.
Process.
I'm surprised that Boucher wasn't in the lineup. But other than that, you've got a lot of guys, Powers, Christian, Bissett. You got guys can play. It's just who's going to step up and who's going to actually get the playing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The defensive coordinator has been solid. I don't know who you take out of there if LeBrecq is coming back in. Brian Sins definitely has earned a spot. If you ask me, back on the D-core. And then the other thing to know is who's going to start in net. Dan, who do you think? Knowing that Friday night against Quinnipiac, they stepped away against the Bobcats.
Wow. It's tough. I don't know why he's shuffling so much stuff around, especially with the goaltenders at the end here, as we wind down the season. I don't know. I'll have to go with Perry just because I was wrong the last time. So
I think it's Perry. I mean, he played. When we started off and when we started talking about this, when we did the first ever night chat, we said who's going to start the second half of the season is going to be Perry or Lou, and it was Perry. It's been Perry pretty much ever since then. Lewis had that one game against Cornell, and then Ville had the game against Quinnipiac. But other than that, it's been Perry, and he's played pretty well. Just with that loss against Union, with some stuff that he really control. There was some hand-eye coordination stuff that you would never see us batting the puck out of midair, and that's tough for a goaltender. And then of course he would come back in last weekend and win against Princeton, so I think Perry is going to get it. What do you think?
I also think Perry will get the start. I wouldn't be surprised though if Runala got the Saturday night game. I think Runala has played well. In that game, he faced 30 shots from a very good Quinnipiac offense. I don't think Runala is the guy to blame for that game. I think it's just the crazy offensive depth Quinnipiac has. Clarkson just couldn't stick with them the whole way. But I think Perry gets the game against Harvard, and depending on how he plays, I would not be surprised if Runala still got the game against Dartmouth, just to continue to get him some time. I think he's looked good. He has been great, but he's been good enough to get a couple of wins and keep Clarkson in games that he's played in. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got some extra time out there.
I think he's the earned the look. But moving on, continuing with some debate topics as we look. We've got about 10 minutes left. Looking on, they take on Union and RPI weekend on the road, of course. That's going to be a tough weekend. And then rolling back and take Princeton and Quinnipiac for the last two home games of the season. Quinnipiac, of course, is senior night. Losing a big senior class, they're going to want to try to make us optimally. Where do you see the men finishing at here as the season comes down to 6 games?
Do you mean like
as far as COC?
At the end of the playoffs or at the end of the regular season?
At the end of the regular season. Where are they going to be as far as ECAC landscape?
I think they'll move into a first round bye. I think they're definitely they have the skills in order to do this. It will really be whether or not they can hold on to it. They've had trouble with going late in the season, like right near the end. They always seem to kind of die off a little bit, but I'm hopeful that they'll ride it out and they'll come away with at least they have 6 games left.
Yep.
I bet they'll come with 4 out of 6, maybe 5, depending on what team's having a bad night.
Mm-hmm. I think the hardest 2 games are going to face this Union at home and Quinnipiac at Shield. I think those are tough games, and I think if there's any that they lose, it's going to be those 2. But optimally, you can see the Knights coming away with victory against RPI and Princeton. I mean, they've done it before. RPI, they're going to be hungry. Ultimately, I would have to agree with 5 or 6. Yeah, or 4 or 5, excuse me. I don't think they get all 6.
I don't think they get all 6, but I think they're good enough to where they can move up.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're either going to get the free bye or they're going to be at home for the first weekend. That's for sure.
But I'm hopeful that they can ride it out and come away with a home tough game.
And you also have to consider if Sexton's out. He's had a hard time. This is the longest we've seen that when he's been here, that he's managed to safely. Yeah. Last year he went out with that knee injury. The year before that, he had the arm. It's been injuries up the wazoo for Ben Sexton. So I know he's getting anxious to come back and start playing again.
Especially being a senior year. So exactly. We'll definitely want to give it his all. One last shot here.
And my thought on that is I think if you look the last 6 games coming up, Harvard's winnable. Smith is winnable.
Yeah.
That game at Union is winnable, but I don't think the Knights can get that on the road.
That's going to be a tough game on the road.
Yeah. They, especially when Union played them so close here without Matt Bodie in the lineup and without it.
Yeah. They're gonna want it.
Union's gonna probably need that to continue to push because Quinnipiac's starting to get their act together, unquote, and they're starting to make their push.
I think they've had their act together all year, though. To be fair, the Bobcats have looked pretty impressive.
They have, but now they know those points are really crucial, so they're going to be pushing, so Union needs to continue to push to try to hold their lead. The RPI game is winnable, even with Haggerty down the lineup. I think the way the Knights dominated the game that they played here shows you that they can certainly take out the Engineers. The game against Princeton is winnable, and the game against Quinnipiac, if it's here, I think the Knights can certainly away with the victory. Last night of the season, depending on what the implications are for that game, especially, if Quinnipiac can move up at all, and if the Knights, how important that game is, it'll be interesting to see what that game looks like once we get there. If Quinnipiac can't catch someone, or if they've really need to catch Union, or if Clarkson can't do anything by winning that game, and I think that'll sort of do how the intensity of that game is going to go. Now, of course, Clarkson's going to want to win it anyway because it's their night, but I think what the Bobcats are going to be able to do will tell you how hard they're going to come and play that game. Now, you always want to go into the tournament with a win, but I don't know if they can't do anything to move themselves up in the standings, if they'll come out and play as hard as we saw them try to rest some guys from postseason.
I really hope that game is deciding for the teams, like where they go, because to come away with a win, like a big win like that, going into the postseason, that would be huge. Huge momentum.
Yeah. It's funny, I think it's actually the first home last game in like 4 years. I think I was talking to some of the players today, and they thought, especially the seniors, they thought it was really nice to finish off with a game at home. So
this night has generally been the weekend before the end of the season, and then they go on road. That last weekend, this weekend, or the last weekend, they get Princeton and Quinnipiac at home at Shield. So that'll be a real telltale game if the Knights can put a stretch together here and try to come away with some big wins. They were so good in that first semester, and they tailed off here in the second semester. So, but if you can go into the plus, like Dan said, with some momentum, that's really huge for you. Even if you have to wait a little by, knowing that we came out, we beat, 4 out of our 5 games, 5 out of our last 6, we were able to win. That's huge momentum going in these CAC playoffs.
Well, of course, if you get the first round bye, you get to have it off, and then quarterfinals, if you can survive there, we're talking about going to semis and the final game over, and that's going to be special this year. Back in Lake Placid, it's for the first time in a couple of years now. Then once you get there, then you have to take a whole new level of variables. Of course, the Knights have played the Festivus face-off and a Halloween face-off out there against St. Lawrence the past 4 years, and they didn't do that this year because of the championship being out there. But when you get to Lake Placid, the first thing that you got to consider is the ice. You got a big sheet out there. It's the 100, 200 that we see in the Olympics, and I think that is how these college teams go at it.
And I think Clarkson going to have an advantage in that, knowing they've already played on that bigger ice, knowing that it's not too far of a drive, Clarkson, to get down there versus some of the other teams. Kodiak, it's a little bit longer from Connecticut to get to Placid. It's for other teams, the travel might be a little bit more than it is for the Knights. And I know people think the travel could be that much, even if it's just a couple extra hours, but it could really the difference between getting to Placid and leaving a day early or having to leave 2 days early so you can get an extra practice and let your guys rest up. Those bus rides really take it out of you. You have a long one. So I think if Clarkson can make it there, they have a significant advantage over a lot of the other teams.
And I think we have the shortest drive to Placid from here. St. Lawrence is a little bit longer, but RPI and Union is right about, I'd say, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we probably have the shortest drive, and that can come to our advantage. Maybe the coaches decide, hey, let's go down there and practice on Wednesday, or take an hour and a half drive down there, bus them down there, you practice for a couple hours on the ice, and hey, I don't think there's anything against that.
And we've seen the teams in the Olympics have not problems, but it's certainly different to adjust to the bigger ice sheet. It's not longer, but there's space on the end boards. And it gives you more space to operate in the corners. There's a lot more space behind the net. So instead of big guys being able to throw you into the boards and take you out, there's a little space, so we've seen some of the quicker teams do well. We saw Norway, almost Canada, some real troubles.
Yeah, you can tell that Canada, they were adjusting. It was their first game, and in the first period, Norway, they played them hard. Yeah, they were a fast team, and Canada didn't have so many great hockey players. I think Norway will give them a run for their money.
Yep,
easily.
And I think that's what you see on the big ice. The U.S. made a real push for it this year to get faster skaters.
Yeah, they got a lot of young guys. They did. You see what happened this morning is they just dominated.
You take guys like Kevin Shattenkirk and Cam Fowler that are ex-skaters, probably some of the best in the NHL, over some bigger lumber defensemen who might be a little more highly touted, but
that's what they did today.
Yeah. You get those guys and you get them on that bigger ice, and we've seen Clarkson like to use their speed a little bit, and they can really move the puck, and when they're going up the ice, they're hard to stop.
Eddie Olszczuk was talking about it. The dots are at the same distance apart from each other, it's still wider, so there's more space outside the dots, and he drew a line on the prompter, connect dots, and if you're a defenseman, try to stay between the two dots, or travel that line, because, as soon as the offenseman can, you want to keep him out. Yeah, and as soon as he mentioned that, USA scored the first goal, they dropped it off to Kessel. Kessel goes out wide. They got Chara, a guy who's not as fast as some of the guys on USA, comes outside the dots. He just drops it off to Carlson, and before you know it, they're inside in, and that was the success. So I think if you get ECAC playoffs there, and Clarkson has some smaller guys, DeRiso, McPherson, Nello, Boucher, the guys who all have similar builds, and then have some great leg underneath them.
Oh, definitely. I would love to see it, honestly. I really hope that I get to see it.
I'm going regardless of if Clarkson's in or
It's great arena down there.
Yeah, it's just a great atmosphere, and what they do for games down there, it's a lot of fun.
Miracle.
Not to mention the history of the bit.
Just the history and the atmosphere of just being there, like that says something about hockey, especially in like the North Country and Northern New York and just the Adirondack region. And then you have the ECAC in that as well. Like it's gonna be a great tournament, and I'm looking forward to it.
Anybody else have any closing remarks before we head off the air for the week?
Well, I guess not really a remark, but we didn't talk too much about the women's team. But
we ran out of time this week.
We ran out of time, but I think there's a big game against Harvard on Friday.
Big game, yes.
It's gigantic in terms of what they are going to be able to do in the ECAC tournament. This game now pretty much decides who's going to win the ECAC.
And we skip talking.
It could, in my opinion, I think it's really going to decide who wins the ECAC.
It could. So, I wouldn't write that. Even if they lose, I wouldn't write them off.
No.
But do they play Harvard Friday or Saturday?
Well, Harvard tomorrow night, and then they get Dartmouth, and then they get a go.
So
on. No, they come home
next
to
week.
play RPI.
So they lose tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. St. Lawrence is they're pretty good at picking up our scraps. Like, if we have a hard-fought game Friday night, yeah, we have a hard-fought game on Friday night on Harvard, St. Lawrence could help out by beating them on Saturday. And then, so all we have to do is beat Dartmouth, which, if we lose to Dartmouth, yeah, we don't deserve to be number one in the ECAC. Then we have RPI on next Friday. That's a winnable game. Yeah, that's a tremendously winnable game. And then, dare I say it, Union, that if we lose to Union, there's some problems. And
you're allowed to say that.
Yeah, I am allowed to say that. And especially senior night, if they come into a building, they beat us senior night. Ugh, yeah. I will never hear the end of that.
I'm just sure
the attendance boost because of senior night.
Yes. The women's team, even if it does, it's a huge game against Harvard.
Yeah.
It's one you gotta come out and you gotta put every effort you got in the women's game, because if you win it, you're at tops in the ECAC. You've easily got the tiebreaker over Harvard.
Yeah.
Because the head-to-head is even, but you have more games played and therefore more wins. So I think it was huge. Root for the ladies here.
I mean, not guaranteed though. You can still come away with a victory at Harvard because of those two ties last week, and you can still come back and have first place at the end of the season. So you may need a little bit of, but first is day Harvard.
Then again, I think if we beat Harvard, it's going to be a hard-fought game, and St. Lawrence can just beat them again. Mm-hmm. Not that it'll be easy for them to, especially Harvard's in 2 games in a row.
I'm pretty sure win or lose, that game is going to be hard fought. Both teams know what that game is going to. It's going to be huge in the standings end of the year. Clarkson gave Harvard a sour taste in mouth last year at the end when they was the only loss Clarkson had at home all year was to the Knights. And then Harvard was able to avenge it in the playoff semifinals. And then Harvard comes in when Clarkson had our taste, and they beat them. And now Clarkson, when they really need a win, they go against the Crimson. So sort of a little bit of a rivalry starting to brew with two teams that have been very good over the last couple of years. I think it's a hugely important matchup. I'd love to see it here, but we've got a just as important game, Mendu against Harvard, and we'll be bringing it live, 7 p.m.
Yeah. And another thing to point out is the Olympics. Harvard doesn't have a lot of the key component right now. So that will help us out.
Yes, definitely. And then of course, Union had their assistant coach, Julie Chu, was there for a while. She is playing with Team USA, and of course, the ladies from USA had a little bit of a bitter taste after that 3-2 loss to Canada. I won't get into that, and we'll tell that still. Some bad refereeing, but nonetheless, the men are at home this weekend. We'll have that game for you on WKN television. Of course, you can stream it online if you go to Clarkson Athletics. Get it there through America One.
Or come watch the game. Dropped at 7. 7. At Shield. Yep.
But of course, if you would be there live,
20.
if you watch it live, you don't get to hear me and my beautiful comment.
We'll really yell very loudly.
Okay, you'll be.
But also, just a quick reminder, it is minor hockey night, so any minor hockey player under the age of 14 who wears their jersey to Friday night's game against Harvard or the game against Dartmouth, it's free general admission to the game. That should put some people in the stands. It's a raucous game. It should be some very good competition. If I were a jersey that's a
I wanted to wear a jersey instead of a suit.
That's a nice thing. Clarkson giving back to the community again. Hopefully there's a lot of youngins that are showing up to support the local college hockey team.
And I hope the pep band get too rowdy from Moss.
The pep band is always rowdy.
Yeah, there are no promises on
Jake, do your best.
Jake's with us. Well, considering it is, I was thinking about going down and play during the breaks if I could. That's something I've tried in the past. But also, I heard that the teddy bear toss, they got over 500 teddy bears donated to local organizations.
Even the premature toss there?
Yeah, that was great. They put the graphic up, and that was a great moment, definitely, for the probably one of the few great moments in that.
I think the best was the teddy bears flew and nobody knew what to do. Ushers came flying out of the stands, and then the guys just hopped off the bench and started, stirring teddy bears towards the Zamboni doors. But anyway, as we just want to remember, so tomorrow the game's there. Harvard in town taking on the Knights. We'll have it for you on WCKN. We'll also keep you updated if you listen to us with the women's game. I know we'll be tuning in and checking it out every once in a while. That's the time though that we have this week here on KnighChat, graciously at WSC 91.1 The Source, or at radio.clarkson.edu. We'll see you guys next week.